This will be a video looking over the fuel pump on the old Volvo F86. It has a TD70 Volvo engine in it. It's not going to be like a full tutorial or anything, but there are a few things in here especially regarding the new seal that might help out anyone tackling a water pump repair on a TD70 engine in the future. First off, I was struggling a little on doing the tensioning for the belts that drive the water pump that needs to be moved to the side to be able to undo the pump itself. We did not bother draining the system or anything. We just placed buckets underneath to collect any coolant escaping, and we started seeing that we could access and loosen the bolts on the pump. Some of them are a little tricky to get access in there. There are 6 bolts holding the pump, so you need to make sure you remove all of them. Once we had made sure that the bolts holding the pump seemed to come undone without too much trouble, we needed to unmount some more things to get access. The expansion tank on top of it sits on a bracket on top of the thermostat housing that also needs to be removed. The thermostat housing is held in place with 2 bolts from the side here that need to be unbolted. And with the bolts removed, it just lifts out if you have undone the hoses connecting to it, and it's kind of a rubber ring that seals between the thermostat housing and the water pump itself. And the bolts here on the water pump, they have a 1/2 inch bolt head. It's not a 13 millimeter as you might be tricked to thinking. So if they are tight on there and you want a nice fit, search for some 1/2 inch sockets or 1/2 inch wrenches. Even the ones holding the thermostat housing are imperial also and not metric, but I don't remember the size. That last bolt up here started hitting the fuel lines, and I wanted to not touch them, but it was possible to get it all the way out, for me at least, without removing them. On installation we did shorten that bolt a tiny bit, cut off a couple of threads on it, made it easier to install it. There will be a lot of cleaning, and I'm not gonna show a lot of that. There will be some more like cleanup later on that I will include, but more on that later. Took some measurements how deep inside the impeller was within the housing, removed the bolts holding the kind of lid or cap in place, and there is also a pin in here that goes through that and through the impeller axle itself. That tiny hammer didn't do much, but with a bigger hammer it started to move. A suitable rod and start driving the impeller shaft out. Had it up on some small plastic spacers here, but had to change to some bigger wooden spacers to start driving it out through the bearings and everything. A lock ring holding the bearings and the belt disc in place, that was removed. Here you can see the bad state of the old seal, so I can understand it. And it's actually had the drain hole clogged, so it had started pushing coolant out through the bearings also. It should be a weep hole showing it. I rigged up a bearing puller to be able to pull the belt disc or belt pulley off it, but missed recording the actual pull itself. Skip like 30 seconds because I'm gonna talk a little bit about cameras, unless you want to hear that. That's why I have something else showing right now, because I've replaced my old camera with a new one, and to be honest I think the video footage is a little worse. The other one is still working, and it's mainly been that the housing I've had, or the mounts for it, that have started breaking. On the camera itself is fine. The rest of this video will be recorded with that new camera. I don't like it one bit. It records or puts the file name based on the date, and it doesn't just add them, so the order might be out of whack a little for me. This turned out to have some burnt windings, and I ordered a new rotor for it, and that fixed this impact wrench. But that's a side note. Back to the water pump. After a rough cleaning, we decided to put all the parts in the sandblasting cabinet and clean them up and repaint them. Broke apart the thermostat housing and the bracket on top of that. We'll get a fresh coat of paint also. And then we boiled the thermostats to make sure they are still operational. They are both at a higher temperature where they should be opening. And I also checked the sensor for temperature, because the temperature gauge does not want to work. And I think that sensor has been replaced with something, because I don't get the exact correct readings really, but some point in time I think that has been replaced with something newer that is quite close to the original sensor in some case, because I think the instrument cluster is original for the truck. And it seems like my new camera hardly records any sound whatsoever. I do have it in a kind of a protective housing now, and I don't think it has any openings in it whatsoever. The old one that had, while the protective housing was still functioning, still had opening in it and could record some sound, so that's another thing I don't like. If anyone can recommend a good camera, please comment. That's preferably cheap. What sound it picks up is mainly from vibration. I think we started driving in some of the new bearings, and here it was mounted on the bench here, so it's a bit jumpy, but some kind of rattle it picks up. Had cut apart one of the old bearings to help as a driver as trying to push the pulley back onto the water pump housing itself. And the new seal kit has arrived, and here we're going to run into the troubles that I didn't really catch in the beginning that might be good to know if you tackle this, because the new seal seems to be having a kind of press fitting onto the axle, and as I understand it, it's a rotational seal that takes it up. On the old one it had that ceramic part on the impeller itself, and then the seal itself did not have a press fit onto the axle as the new style of seal is having, and this caused some problems for me. I'm not really happy with this repair. Here you can see the ceramic part thing that was the kind of main sealing surface on the old seal, and it rode against the seal, and the seal had a spring-loaded thing, and it could slide in and out and was held fixed and did not rotate with the pump. On the new unit, that it still has kind of a spring-loaded thing and rides against that ceramic thing, but the part of that seal still rotates freely on the seal itself, and then the metal part of the seal, new seal, has a press fit onto the axle that I did not really catch before I started the assembly, and that caused some issues, causing me not to be very happy with this repair. I think and hope it will hold up, but that must be something you check before starting to assemble it. If you and from what I can research and talk to the seller of the parts, all the new seals are like that, so that's something to watch out for. That old ceramic ring was a bit of a struggle to get out, but with some hammering it eventually broke, and then it was easy to pry it out. After cleanup and a little bit of grease on that rubber that supports the ceramic ring, the new one easily pushed into place. There is a third small bearing in here that goes behind the seal, and then there are two big bearings within the belt pulley, the belt wheel itself. Did not have something perfectly suitable to drive in the new seal, but it will be popped out later on because of that press fit issue, so I started bending the edges on it. Resorted to a driver and slowly moving round and round and seating that seal. And here we start to realize the problem, that the new seal is different than the old seal, and what are we gonna do? I'm not gonna say I was desperate, but a little bit annoyed. So we were decided we were gonna try to force it through there, as we realized it should be like that. But since it has a spring-loaded part in there, like trying to hammer it down did not work. Had you had a press set up, it might have worked to jam it in like this, but hammering was not gonna go, and we started seeing that the hammering started to kind of force the belt pulley part to want to move out and actually bend the lock ring a tiny bit, so we've stopped doing this. Did a quick test with a big clamp, but it's just not possible to line things up without having a proper press like this, so we resorted to a different solution, and I hope that works. We haven't started the machine yet, so I will post this video before I know if this fix actually works. We ended up hammering the impeller and axle back out, and that took the seal with it out, because the seal had started going onto the shaft, and decided to kind of fit the seal into position on the shaft before driving the axle and impeller back in. Took some more measurements just to ensure that we didn't drive the seal too far down, but turns out it has to be pretty much dead on to that ceramic ring, and the spring quite compressed when everything is mounted back into place. We cut open that small bearing and used the inner race as a driver tool. We had cut a slit in it so it could be removed quite easily, and then a pipe behind it to drive it onto the shaft and get the seal to where it wanted to be. And also it has this kind of ring that's supposed to force any leak out through the weep hole behind it. That's also kind of a press fit, so that was also put into place. Remove that lock ring that had started to deform. There was also quite a bit of tension on the pulley itself. We did not spin smoothly, and then the bearing race was brought in, and a few more hammer blows to make things kind of sink down, and a new lock ring could be fitted. And this time around it was possible to hammer in the axle and the impeller and all of that, and that lock pin for the cap could be put into place. And the water pump is seized up, the impeller is hitting the housing, and the clearance is not there anymore, and the previous hammer might have shifted the impeller a little deeper onto the axle, we realized, so that needs to be addressed. So we tried giving it a few whacks just at the end and see if that would free things up, that something it should, but no. It was possible to get in there with a punch through one of the ports and put some hammer blows to the impeller, and it started moving, so we kept doing that until we had, well, it's still a lot tighter clearance from the housing to the impeller than what we had when we took it apart, but now it's at least, it should be 1 millimeter, and we have about a half now, but that should be good enough, so we called it like that and started preparing to put it back on the motor. Had bought a new lower temperature at thermostat. It still opens a little late, it feels like, but it opens sooner than the ones that were in there. But the ones that are in there has kind of a little bypass thing that can equalize pressure when the machine is not in use. I think it's a safety feature to not have a unnecessary pressure build up within the coolant system. And this new one did not have that, so I just bought one new lower temperature one and reused the better looking of the old ones. New seals on the thermostat and the inlet outlet on top of it, and the bracket could be bolted into place. The bracket was actually cracked, and my dad had welded that before we cleaned everything up and repaired that, but was not recorded. And with all the pieces ready, a little touch up of the paint in some places, and time to go back to the truck and mount it. And that side required more cleanup, scraping old gasket away, so Having old machines, you have a lot of cleanup to do when wrenching. Started putting some grease on there to help with for the seal, new gasket to kind of get in place, and felt that I had missed a spot. Had some grease on the pump itself and had put the gasket in place, and then I had one of the bolts ready to start lining up, and as I said earlier, we had shortened one of them a tiny bit that was close to those fuel lines to not have to mess with them. One bolt caused little issues, but with a little pressure it went in there. I think a tiny little edge on the gasket caught the bolt, but it went in there without too much trouble, so I'm quite confident that that part at least will hold up. The rest of it, with the hammering in and out the seal, I'm not as sure about. New rubber ring for sealing between the thermostat housing and water pump installed, and the thermostat housing could be bolted back into place. All the hoses were reconnected, the expansion tank, and it's ready to do a test start, and I will get around to that hopefully quite soon. But right now I have the wheel loader in also and doing more wrenching, so more videos will come. All of that has also been recorded with this new camera that I don't really like, so I will probably go back to using the old one again. I hope the new one is close enough in fitment that the mounts that came with the new one can be used with the old one, and maybe I'll give away that new one if anyone wants it. One little thing with the tensioner pulley, the tensioner wheel, that one was spinning way too easily. There does not seem to be really any corrosion within the bearing. I was tempted to replace them, but then I got lazy, and since it didn't look too bad in there, I just repacked it with a bunch of fresh grease and put it back together. And this truck does not see a whole lot of use over the years, but it's very nice to find when you need something moved, so it will stick around for a while longer. So that's it for now. Hope everyone is having a great day. Spring is late here in the north part. It's still below freezing in the north part of Sweden. It's still below freezing during the nights here and there, and there's quite a bit of snow left. Usually by May most of the snow is gone, but not this year.